The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Shalom and welcome to the synagogue. This is a podcast for consenting adults for information, education, and entertainment on BDSM, sexuality, and all things related. If you're not a legal, enthusiastically consenting adult, then
pick up the needle, press pause, or turn the radio off.
For those who remain, now might be a good time to switch to your headphones.
Welcome to the synagogue. I am your host. They call me the rabbi.
Pretty fly for a rabbi.
I put the sin in synagogue, and I am a cisgender, ambimorous, gynosexual, sadistic, bratty daddy doll. Sex therapist by day, kink educator by night, and in both these roles I help people make their kink a religious experience. While I am a mental health professional, this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a replacement for therapy. Seek out the assistance of a trained professional for help with your specific situation. Hosting with me today is my partner, my ADHD squirrel wrangler, my submissive, my brat, my pony, or just my little pony. Aww. The Nate dog to my Warren G. little bit.
Oh my gosh.
This is episode number 10, and with us today is Paul Ruloff and his partner, CherryWatermelon.
Hello. Thank you.
Thank you for having us on.
Here to talk to us about Ageplay. Paul talks about his past work with Ageplay, delves into Ageplay-related questions as well, talking about Ageplay-related events that he runs in St. Louis. But first, a word from our sponsor. Paul Ruloff, aka RuleOfThree, has been part of the alternative sexuality community for over 10 years, largely focused on promoting and educating about Ageplay. During that time, he has engaged in many activities that have helped hundreds of people learn about, explore, problem solve, and think about their interests in Ageplay. He has started and contributed to many different Ageplay projects. He helped found the Chicago Ageplay Players, founded Capcom, the Midwest Ageplay Convention, and the St. Louis Ageplayers. He also has the nonfiction book, Ageplay from Diapers to Diplomas, and is working on a book solely for caregivers. He also lectures across the country and internationally, largely about Ageplay, mental play, and Ageplay relationship dynamics. He has presented Ageplay topics at many different alternative sexuality conferences, clubs, and events all across the U.S. This includes addressing Ageplay at CARUS, an alternative sexuality academic conference for professionals including healthcare workers and mental health professionals. He also has served as an expert witness on Ageplay for a Texas Supreme Court case. Paul is also a therapist and coach serving alternative lifestyle individuals. CherryWatermelon, she, her, hers, is a passionate kinkster who loves to talk about all things kink and sex. She spent many years as an adult store manager in Canada, which has led her to being able to combine her knowledge of sex toys and kink. Creating and fostering an inclusive environment for all people is her goal. She brings with her over 9 years of being involved in the kink community, both in St. Louis and her hometown of Niagara Falls, Canada. She identifies as bottom, middle, princess, and emotional masochist. She is co-host of the Ageplay Munch in St. Louis, as well as the Ageplay Fun Days. She believes kink should be a safe place for everyone to explore. Thank you for being here in the synagogue. Let's talk about Ageplay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yay.
So we'll start off the bat with what is Ageplay and what isn't Ageplay?
Sure. So Ageplay is basic. There's two different kinds of Ageplay to start. There's either role-playing or erotic role-playing. And a lot of times we can see this in the mainstream porn, such as schoolgirl teacher or naughty schoolgirl or cheerleader type fantasies. And then there's also regressive Ageplay, where people kind of walk back in their own personal timeline to an earlier, more innocent headspace. And age play in general is role-playing or regression that takes us to a different age. A lot of times it's more for that innocence, that fun that people want to have. A lot of times there's vibrant emotions in there as well. Age play is not largely the thing that I talk about most is it's not pedophilia. It doesn't create a minor. It doesn't fulfill that drive in those individuals. A lot of times there is innocent, fun play, like going to the zoo. Other times it's darker, more spicy age play that does have some sexual components as well. And it also really marries well with folks who are diaper lovers sometimes. Brandy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Just to reinforce that, age play is between two consenting adults.
Very good. So why do people enjoy age play?
Well, I think for a lot of us, it allows us to go back to a time in which maybe wasn't so good. And we get to recreate some experiences that we didn't get to have that help us maybe heal some of those parts in us and move forward in a better headspace. Maybe, there's a lot of trans folks who are into age play who get to re-experience growing up in the gender that they are and not the gender that they were assigned at birth.
And at least for me, from the caregiver side, it's really an opportunity to help people grow, help people shape, kind of impart wisdom, provide that guidance, and sometimes really see actual change in people's lives because of that age play dynamic. So, for example, I taught Brandy how to drive. She had not driven before. She tried back when she lived in Niagara Falls, but it was a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. And just like a real parent, I took her aside and we went through the whole driving process from getting her just into the driver's seat until when she finally got her driver's license.
And then we went through the terrible teenage years of driving.
I've also heard that the concept of the shrinking childhood can lead to people embracing age play as they get older. The putting adult responsibilities on children before they're ready to do that, and then going back and wanting to reclaim that childhood.
And that's definitely something that at least I've heard an awful lot of, especially from the oldest daughter in a family who is often really kind of run over with a lot of caregiving responsibilities when they're very young. I've had folks tell me that when they were 8, they were cooking dinner for the family or the primary caregiver for their younger siblings or things like that.
Well, I think very much in this post-pandemic world, we're due for an age play explosion in a few years. All the kids who got stuck at home with their younger siblings, watching them basically all day long and taking care for them while mom and dad still had to go to work, schools closed. I think it's just a matter of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I can echo that as, the oldest daughter, the oldest cousin, and the oldest granddaughter.
Nope, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, exactly. You feel that.
Yes.
It is a way to lessen that load that you've carried around your entire life and get to let somebody take care of you and be vulnerable.
And what, from the big side, what do you get out of it?
I think really if we're talking about demographics, I think we are definitely due for an explosion of bigs as well, because people are having less children. And so I don't have any actual physical children, but I'm able to tap into that parenting side through age play and helping Brandy along and being her daddy that I kind of miss out on by not having actual biological children.
And so it creates a source of satisfaction for you without the, I wouldn't say responsibility, but even just the, actual, of having biological children, you can still satisfy part of that aspect for yourself.
Definitely. And so Brandy is an age player who focuses not necessarily on the childish aspects, but more of the adolescent and teenage ones. So as a daddy for her, we didn't have to go through diaper stuff or feeding her or anything like that. We just kind of take the really fun activities of going out and doing stuff or working together on projects and run with that.
So let's take a minute, and for listeners who maybe have never delved into age play before, let's define what littles and bigs are and what different types there are.
Sure. From the big side, there's generally a breakdown of caregivers versus bigs. And how I conceptualize it is caregivers are people that provide care to their non-caregiver partner. They're people that actually care. And this is usually a mommy, daddy, big brother sort of role an awful lot of the times. As a big, you can also have age play scenarios that don't involve being beneficial to the non-caregiver partner. So we could do an age play medical scene where it's the big scary doctor and the little kid having to go in and get a shot or something like that, and that would be more of a big versus a caregiver because they aren't necessarily doing positive stuff.
I like how you put that it's not always positive stuff. And I can foresee the in that aspect of being a big, even if in general you might be a daddy or a mommy or a caregiver, in the scenario of you're a big and you've decided to do something scene-wise with a little, and say it's like, as you were saying, the big scary doctor, giving a shot, well, then that you're incorporating age play and maybe needle play at the same time.
And age play is definitely an umbrella fetish or kink where a lot of stuff falls underneath of it. You can play cowboys and Indians and have rope play in there as well, or really a lot of stuff just falls into that you can really customize.
Littles would start at, you can be an adult baby where you wear diapers and prefer to be in a crib, hand-fed, nonverbal. I would say that's a lot of like infant play. And then littles tend to be at the toddler stage up until I would say 6 or 7 in age. And then you would have a lot more like coloring, movie time, some fun arts and crafts. You would probably be the little that's scared to go to the doctor and get the needle in that age range. And then you have middles, and they tend to be anywhere from 10, I'm going to say 10 to 18. I know there are some older middles. They tend to be, in my experience, more involved in the sexual side of age play, as well as like the naughty babysitters So middles can fall into being on the little side, but also the caregiver side, because I also know a lot of middles that when we're around littles, we tend to be like, oh no, you dropped your sippy cup. And we like help them and kind of take care of them too. So you get like a middle ground there, which is fun to play in. Yeah, middles just kind of are kind of get to play a little bit on both sides. And like I said, they tend to fall into the more sexual part of it. My middle is very angsty and living out my goth fantasies that I wanted to live when I was, 13, 14 and didn't have money. And now I do. And so I can really create a space for myself that makes that part of my childhood really happy.
I mean, I know a lot of people use age play and DDLG, Daddy Dom Little Girl, interchangeably, but I think it's important to remember that any gender-ending orientation can be used in age play. Mommies, daddies, caregivers, little boys, little girls, little children.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, I think DDLG relationships get a lot of attention, especially like on TikTok and whatnot. It's pretty prevalent, but age play relationships and age play dynamics can involve anyone, any gender, any sexual orientation. It's not just heteronormative.
And really, there's opportunities for having family roles as well as non-family roles in there as well. So, yep, it may be DDLG, but it may also be just two middles hanging out at a store, or littles going to the zoo, or something along those lines.
So what other kind of things do people do in age play for a scene for play?
A lot of times there are some bratting dynamics that people enjoy, and other people enjoy being good girls, and Brandy can definitely talk more to that. But I think one thing that, as a big, I really enjoy is being able to show people stuff that they haven't before. So whether that's going to a museum or whatever sort of outing it is, or else sometimes just the care and affection that people may not have necessarily had during that portion in their childhood. And for people who during the day they have a hard job and a lot of pressure, are able to just kick back and relax and play with Legos or get into a cartoon or whatever that is, seeing that stepping back, that freedom, is something that I especially love.
Yeah, I think when I'm thinking of scenes and I'm thinking of people play, definitely. So for me, I don't think I'm a brat. I might be a little bit mouthy, but 99% of the time I'm going to do what I'm told. Maybe not with enthusiasm, but I'm definitely going to do it. So I feel like brats definitely fall into a little bit of the age play. And, you can see a lot of scenes where there's like spanking going on and there's some fight back, or, some mouthing off to try and get like a harder spanking. I think that I tend to brat if I'm bottoming with somebody else. I try to get them in more trouble than I can get into. That's usually what I'll be like, oh, they said this, you should hit them harder. And, so that I can have a breather. And then I usually get it back because they're like, oh, you bitch. But yeah, I think age play can be mixed into any kind of like BDSM play as long as it's talked about before. If you're doing pickup play with somebody who doesn't feel comfortable with your little side, then you want to talk about that. But if you're playing with your dom and your dom is also your daddy, I feel like those aspects of your dynamic come out whether you want them to or not. They're there. They're always prevalent. Like Paul and I, we slip into our dynamic throughout the day at so many different times. So when we play, it's hard not to have that come out too, right? There's points where I'm, I'm being obedient and I'm listening, and then there's parts where I'm pouting and being like, "Daddy, why are you hurting me?" so, so yeah, I think it just can be around with everything, and it flows through.
It is really a natural and fluid progression, at least the structure of our relationships, because sometimes she might be needy or wanting support or whatever that is, and it's perfectly fine. And other times it's just fun or sexy or even harder with punishment or something like that.
You mentioned brats. Brats have a, let's say, controversial reputation within the communities. How do you define brat? And I'm going to assume, since you identify as one, why do you feel that that bad reputation is not quite deserved?
So I'm going to say, sometimes brats deserve the reputation that they get, because I don't think they necessarily ask for consent when they're bratting. And I think that that's important. I think that you wouldn't go up to anybody and just smack them across the face if that's your kink without consent. And I feel like bratting is the same way. If you're going to brat, it needs to be consented by both parties. Not every top wants to be a brat tamer. Not every top can be a brat tamer. And I feel like sometimes in those cases the reputation is deserved. However, for the most part, so brats needs to be consented on by both parties. I think it's important that if you are a really bratty brat, and that's something you do all the time, that you need to have a safe word for your top when they really are just done with your shit. And you need to be able to stop. Like with anything, there needs to be a way to just be like, okay, I'm really done. Can you just fucking go pick up your socks? You know what I mean? and just be like, this is like, we're done with this whole thing. Go do what it is that you need to do. But I think for the most part, it's playful and it's fun, and it can be kind of sexy to be like, I'm not going to go do that. And then you get grabbed by the back of your hair and made to go do that. Or by the side of, like, by your earlobe, and you're like, no, you are going to do these things. So I don't think it's a general deserved bad reputation that they get. I think it should be based on the individual and who they are in the community, and that they are aware of what they're doing.
At least from my side, I see brats as contributing energy to the scene, or else kind of egging their partner on to be more intense or to provoke that reaction. And a lot of times when people know each other well, that lets the brat have a finer amount of control, and Brandy can do whatever she does to make me spank her tougher or bite her or whatever it happens to be. And sometimes that encouragement is really needed or necessary, and it's kind of a shorthand for saying, hey, can you up that intensity, or can you do this without formally laying it out there.
The question also would then be, between the two of you, essentially more of a bit of a blanket consent when it comes to bratting is there. So that way it's not negotiated each and every time of like, I'm going to brat today. Is that okay?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely there as a blanket consent. But at any point, Paul could say like, I just need you to do the things. And I'd be like, okay, understood, and you get that like, okay, got it. Today is not the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, of course, at any time, consent being revoked and all of that. But, I mean, to initiate it, it's that blanket
Absolutely.
part. And then, if he's just like, nope, not today. This is, nope. Even without the safe word or whatever, it's just, the difference. And it's like, all right, let me back off. Let me just do the things.
Right. And I mean, vice versa, right? Like, sometimes you just don't want to be topped.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're like, you know what? I'm just so not in the mood to be told what to do today. So, it's blanket consent for both of us, but we are able to kind of understand what we're doing, and what we need from each other.
Sure.
I mean, anything done without consent is not kink in my book. So if it's a brat who doesn't have consent, then they're not a brat, they're just an asshole.
Yeah, plain and simple. Yes.
So my introduction to age play was literally my first night involved in kink. Met somebody online, we went to dinner, they're telling me about the different types of power exchange. They mentioned daddy dom little girl. I went, that's it, that's me. What is that? For a little bit, her first experience was with me. We were just beginning talking, and she kept saying things. I'm like, are you sure you're not a little? I'm not a little. Are you sure you're not a little? I'm not a little. And then one day her response instead was, I is not a little. And haven't looked back since then. So what is, one, your two's introduction to age play? And for those who want to introduce their partner to age play, who want to explore it, how would you recommend them getting into it?
So my introduction to age play, and because I'm an old dinosaur, there wasn't really much available online at that point that I was able to find, other than a lot of times the adult baby stuff. And I knew that wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. There was a website called Little Girl Lost, where whoever ran it had kind of the different ages that they enjoyed playing. And it was also very, very kind of gothy as well. And it was really kind of a struggle, because without a lot of education, without a lot of community knowledge, it was really kind of an interesting point, because I really had to question myself and say, am I a pedophile? I love plaid skirts. I love that concept of innocence, but yet the girls that I was looking at were in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. So I was able to rule that out, but there was a good amount of time where it was a real questioning thing, because we didn't have the sexual education and the knowledge of the fetishes that we do now. Even when I started teaching probably 10 years ago or so, a lot of the communities that I visited, this was the first time that they had heard about age play as well. So I feel like it was kind of a rocky start for me until I was able to find people that could really reinforce that and say, you know what, I love being treated with that care, or I love you daddying me. And then that kind of took off.
Well, I will say you were one of those people, to me, who was affirming of that identity. My first kink convention 5 months later, you're there teaching a class on age play, so thank you for that.
And I've really been blessed to go to a lot of different areas and provide that reassurance. Because, I mean, I kind of grew up kink in Chicago, and there wasn't really anybody that talked about it or did it. We had one age play class at a convention that I went to, and I was like, this is only looking at such a small fragment. Usually the adult baby, the very much littles, and it didn't talk about caregivers at all either. And that's what really kind of inspired me to go out and teach and kind of spread that word there. As far as seeing if other people are interested in it, there's, I guess, sometimes that carefree aspect, or that little bit of innocence that is kind of that spark. And just like you said with Little Bit, other people can kind of see that as well. And maybe they do ask, are you a little? And after a while, there is some hesitance and some pushback from from a lot of people who eventually do say that they're littles. And I'm not sure if it's just the stigma of the irresponsibility or of play, or that not being wanting to be seen as a kid, or childlike, because our society really values independence and hard work and whatnot. But a lot of folks who start out by having other people noticing that do kind of explore, and some of them are like, yeah, I really am a little.
And while society kind of looks its nose down on age play, both the kink community and the vanilla community, you go and look in popular culture and there is just so much stuff that is age play. Like the Halloween costumes for cheerleaders and schoolgirls and whatnot, or songs like Hot for Teacher. Nobody will convince me that is not an age play song, or Father Figure.
Oh my god, yeah.
Or, I mean, those are very explicitly age play songs. There are some that are more subtle and whatnot. Oh Daddy by Fleetwood Mac. But also, Tell Me Hot Topic is not age play central.
It couldn't try harder.
I was gonna say, and CherryWatermelon, yes. and your origin story. How did you get into age play?
So, about 10 years ago is when I kind of discovered my kink side. So in my early 30s, and I found Tumblr. And if you remember, 10 years ago, Tumblr was like at its peak of like BDSM blogs and stuff like that. So I had a pretty decent sized following on Tumblr, and I actually met my ex-husband on Tumblr, and our dynamic started off as a very traditional DS dynamic, and then I knew that. So I'm just going to be completely honest. I knew I was little. I didn't want to admit it. It was more palatable for me to say that I was a kitten, and I wanted that kind of care and affection in my play as well, rather than just out and admit that I was little. And I didn't really know where I was falling in the little space. I didn't want to admit it because I'm super close to my dad, and I was like, oh God, am I weird? Do I want to fuck my dad? Like, what is wrong with me? And I had to go through a lot of that to get to where I was. And when I finally admitted to my partner, my partner said, it's time to go to bed, and I just, without thinking, went, okay, daddy, and that was it. And it just hit the ground running, and that's where we went. And then I actually had to come out to my friends in kink because I was stepping into the scene, and I was really nervous about telling everybody that I was a little, and I was like, I don't know how they're going to react to this. No one had ever said anything bad, but I had heard, people outside of my circle not, being like, littles are so annoying, and they're so this, and they're so that. And so when I told my friends, they all just looked at me and they were like, yeah, no kidding. And I was like, oh, so it's obvious to everybody. Okay, great. And then from there, it really just kind of became part of my kink. Yeah.
Very cool.
Nice.
So how much for you does the kitten identity overlap with the little identity? Are they separate? Are they intertwined? Are they overlapping?
So the funny thing about kink is that you are forever changing. And I am not a kitten. Pet play for me, I tried and I felt like that was more comfortable, but I am not a kitten any longer. That part kind of just fell to the wayside. Though recently I have discovered how much I love Hoo-Cow. So nice. That is definitely more aligned with my kinks. 'Cause I like the dark side of the stuff. Like, sure, the fun and innocence is great and all, but, like, my emotional masochism really is, I would say, my most prevalent and the kink that gives me the most back. So, dark age play is really where mine and Paul's play exists. And then same with Who Cow. I kind of like how there's like this light, like prettiness to the cow, but then also like a darker side. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay.
That's fair. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we're both very much into the hybrid little stuff, or hybrid age play stuff. A little bit, if it's not obvious, is Little Pony. So both identities at the same time, sometimes separate as well. I identify as a bratty daddy, and I would say those are complete overlaps for me. What ones have you heard out there? Which ones do you find interesting?
We have a lot of people who are really into unusual pet play. Things like raccoons or other animals that I hear an awful lot.
That they overlap with their
Yes,
little age play?
they have multiple roles, and sometimes they kind of go from pet to little, and a lot of still caring qualities kind of in there as well.
I would say, like, if you come
Very
to,
cool.
if you're ever in St. Louis and you are around here and you come to our Age Play Munch, you are going to see just as many littles as you are going to see pups and furries at our munch. I think they completely overlap with each other. You know, you'll have people in their furry costumes wearing diapers, and those just go hand in hand. And I think as a middle, I love when people come as their, you know, their animal selves, because what little doesn't want to play with a puppy or a cat or something like that, you know? And it just is like the most, it's like a match made in heaven. Like, we all want to play together and we all coincide together, and the energy is spectacular.
I'm fascinated by the raccoon and the little, because that's not what I've heard
Well,
before.
it's kind of troublemaking and mischievous, and
I can definitely picture
Yeah,
it.
there's a lot of people who are like, which I think is great, because also identify as a goblin. And so, you know, you're just kind of like a little chaos goblin causing problems as you run around, and a lot of like, not like tee-hee-hees, but a lot of heh-heh-heh. And, you know, and you kind of just start causing mayhem.
I mean, one of my favorites I've seen out there is combining the mommy caregiver with puppy play, and it winds up looking like Nana from the Peter Pan cartoon.
That's spectacular.
Like, I'm intrigued by, so I've been hearing a new trend of, what was it? And I don't know why this hasn't happened sooner. And granted, at least in our area region, of like, they have a pet and littles like play day type of thing. And so they're like, hey, so we're going to have a mosh, but we're going to invite the littles to play with, like, you know, all of the pets.
Pull your ears and tails.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, and they're like, oh my goodness, who would have thought this would be so much fun, of having the littles and the pets together? And I'm going, duh.
I mean, it really makes sense.
It really does. So, you know, it seems I've come across it a couple of times at like different events, and they're like, why didn't we think of this sooner? Well, yeah, why didn't we think of this sooner? This is like, you know, a really good thing of, you know, of play and enjoyment and allowing people to do the different things. And look, I got a new puppy, but I don't have to take it home and actually care for it. I can leave it here, and it can like magically, like, you know, adult itself.
Exactly.
Later.
Exactly. And I think, like, with littles and pet play, like, you know, the enthusiasm that littles have when they're in headspace really pumps up, you know, pups and other animals, because who doesn't want to, like, when you've got a little, like, squeeing with joy because they threw the ball and you brought the ball back, and they're just going to keep doing it over and over again because they can't be happier. I mean, I can't imagine, as a pup, that just has got to be feeling so good and so much fun. So, yeah, it's just, I don't know, I think it's a beautiful thing. It sort of happened organically in the munch that we host, where pups started coming too. And yeah, now I would say it's easily 50-50.
And a lot of times just that outside reinforcement helps your headspace so much. Because you could be a puppy or a kitty and be doing your thing, and that's all well and good, but when a little kind of stumbles along and starts to pet the little puppy or whatever it is, I feel like both of them get a reinforcement to their role in that.
I definitely have to agree with that.
And I think it's two outside communities, you know, like on the fringe of BDSM that can come together and accept each other wholeheartedly and without judgment, and that just feels amazing too.
I don't know if I'd say on the fringe, but maybe not as understood as other folks.
That's a kinder way of putting it.
Fair.
Yeah. So speaking of roles, normally the big is the dominant, the submissive is the little, but that's not a hard and fast
Correct.
rule, right?
Just because the normal family structure is what it's kind of based around doesn't mean that people kind of flip that on the side. And I always go to the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movies where Veruca Salt is very much in control and demanding, and her father is trying to please her, trying just to do whatever she wants in order for it to be okay. And it can go back and forth, folks can switch, or else it can be more of a service caregiver with the little being in charge. I want some ice cream. Great, we're going to do that.
Very cool. So how does one make the most out of their age play?
Having other age players around really amplifies that headspace so much. You've also got to look into yourself and see what you do enjoy and kind of focus there. A lot of times people, I knew a guy back in Chicago, you know, one weekend a month was his little weekend, and he would turn off his phone, he'd lock his doors, and he'd put a diaper on, and all weekend he'd just, like, eat cereal and watch cartoons. And that's perfectly legitimate as well, but finding what really feeds you is so very important. I always think it's really interesting because we have a lady that comes in on our Age Play Fun Days and does a science class. Basically like a little experiment or a demo or something like that. We put Mentos in Coke one time or something like that. And Brandy was really shocked that she enjoyed it so much and it dipped her so far down into headspace. So trying different things and seeing how that impacts your headspace and kind of adjusting from there, I think is really valuable.
So I'm hearing you have a Bill Nye role player.
Pretty much. She really enjoys doing that and being educational as well as seeing the kind of exuberance that folks have towards it.
I mean, she's amazing, and she is so accepting and loving with the age play community. She really, like, we can count on her. I don't think there's been an age play day, Paul, that we've done where she hasn't been there.
I believe you're right.
And she just tries so hard and gives so much, and these are like legit science experiments that you would do in school, and it is amazing as an adult to just lower that mindset down and just go back into that I'm learning something kind of mindset. And wow, it was amazing for me because I don't think I've ever felt as little and as regressed as I did in her class. And we were playing with bubbles and making like prisms out of bubbles. It was so freaking cool. And yeah, it was so amazing. And I mean, if people really want to get into age play and really want to experience it, community is my suggestion. Find community, find people who are like you, and explore that way.
I mean, the first time Little Bit went all the way into Little Headspace was when there were other littles around. It was in St. Louis at one of the two big events. I don't remember which one.
Thanksgiving.
Okay, Spanksgiving, and there were Shrinky Dinks and coloring, and she just went full all in, coloring the Shrinky Dinks, and wow, yours looks pretty type stuff.
It was easier to just kind of, slip into that a little bit more. Granted, like, I could feel myself not going into, like, it was there, but I could feel where my limit of little was.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I get much more little when I color, and when I'm around other littles coloring, it kind of just lets me drift off, but it only goes so far down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because even there was, even for me, there was a few littles that I was like, oh no, that's way too far for me. Like, just on some aspect of my brainwave and thought pattern, okay, I don't want to go that far down, but I can stay where I'm at and be comfortable and interact with, some of the other littles who were farther down little compared to me. But I was like, okay, after a while, I'm like, I need to move up to other littles that are closer to where my age range is, because I identify as a non-specific age.
And I just want to shout out and say that's really okay. You don't need to have, you or anyone doesn't need to have a particular age. And several people also have different ages that they play. And that's perfectly legitimate as well. I always tell people don't focus so much on picking out a number as much as looking at the activities that you enjoy.
Oh, I like that. I really like that. That is definitely some useful information when conversing with
Because
others.
if I say, oh, well, I'm a 4-year-old, that might take some of the stuff that you really enjoy and kind of put it in the back seat. And I guess we should say that, like, that your age is just a guideline, and you can expand beyond that. So,
Of course.
So age play is one of those things that's hard to do 24/7. You can't stay in your crib 24/7 unless your daddy is full-on sugar daddy. How can you bring that through the day, though?
at least for me, I think it's a lot of it involves kind of checking in, and that building those habits or those rituals that drop people into headspace just for a minute. And Brandy has a professional job, but sometimes she can take a second to look out at her phone, and I imagine that she drops into a little bit of that role when she's replying to a text. Other simple things to kind of build it in are even just like opening the door for the other person, or holding hands when you're walking across the street, or things that are kind of little and protective but don't drop you so much into that headspace. Even like a good night kiss as well can kind of, and some people enjoy being tucked in as well, can foster that sense of relationship throughout the day.
And I think it's important to remember that you do have to put the headspace aside at some points. I don't think it's healthy to want to be in headspace 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because you got to deal with stuff, right? You got to deal with the adult stuff that is in front of you. So, I think it's important to recognize that it's not good to just want to be a child all the time. However, I think Paul's right with like little tiny rituals that you can do throughout the day that really connect to those sort of things. I know we do. If he and I are going somewhere, even if it's just grocery shopping, he'll buckle me into the car, and then give me a forehead kiss, and that's just a nice little way to remind me and him that we have that dynamic. Or when I'm holding his hand, to like just hold his last two fingers and not his entire hand. That really makes me feel small in the moment. I'm I'm trying to think of what else we do. It's so natural at this point sometimes that it's hard to remember.
But I think the main thing that we're really getting here is that balance. And you're right. We can't stay in the crib or stay in headspace 24/7, and that's not necessarily productive or maybe even healthy. I don't know. But being able to find segments of time where we can delve into that headspace is really good. I want to live my life with Brandy, and sometimes that's her as an adult, and sometimes that's her in her age play headspace. And at the end of the day, I love her when she's being normal and when she's in headspace, and we have a good life and get things done and have enjoyable things, but it's not all the headspace. I sometimes need the person behind that as well.
Sure. I mean, as I'm listening to your ways how to do it 24/7, what popped into my head is the guys on Big Bang Theory. They always have their action figures around them. They have the comic book t-shirts. That would do it for me to have those reminders throughout the day. I'm not sure that's what they were going for, but I would say that would work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have a Squishmallow on my desk at work. So it's little reminders like that just kind of keep you there. I've cultivated my room to be my middle's dream room. You know, it's gothy and spooky in every way. So little things like that just kind of help you remember that you have this freedom of expression.
Yeah, call them collectibles. Your mom won't bat an eye on it. At it.
Exactly.
Or your boss or whoever.
Exactly.
So, a question I've heard before, and I've never really heard a great answer. I've heard okay answers to it. Person's doing age play. They like it. They enjoy it. But they have kids. And the kids are slowly becoming the age that this person age plays as. And that creeps them out. How would you suggest dealing with that?
So I've heard a lot of people that come into this point, and a lot of people end up taking a break from the age play and focusing on other roles. Once again, it's very individualistic. So people, if they are able to tilt away from that particular range or those particular activities that their kids are hitting, maybe that would be another way to go about maintaining that age play relationship without having it being too burdensome. And I talk about caregiver fatigue or caregiver burnout an awful lot. And if I'm busy diapering my little and all of a sudden our kids are hitting that diaper age, maybe I don't want to do that thing so much. And really exploring together and finding other satisfactory experiences. Maybe it's just going to be cuddling, or holding each other, or whatever it happens to be. Keeping that age play relationship as productive and fun instead of just another thing that the caregiver may need to do, or having it kind of squick them out might be the way to go.
Very good.
Makes sense. You've talked a couple of times about regression. Can you clarify and kind of explain what you mean by the regression?
Sure. When we talk about regression, it's sometimes, in a non-kink sense, it's a defense mechanism that people go back to an earlier age and for a little bit of comfort, for a little bit of reassurance. When we talk about age play regression, people go back in their mind to that earlier time and kind of feel the same way. And Brandy talked about that she felt kind of that regression hit her when they were doing that bubble science experiment. So it's not that they're taking on a different role or they're not coming up with a character. They're actually kind of stepping back in their own timeline, if that makes sense. Brandy, what did it feel like when you did do that regression?
It was really calming because it as somebody whose brain is going 100 miles an hour in 100 different directions, I was really able to feel like I had regressed to that age where I was able to focus and pay attention, really take in everything that happened. It felt really single-minded. I was doing one task. That was it. I was there. I was present in my body. I was present in the moment. And there wasn't outside influences. I wasn't wondering, how much laundry do I have to put away? Or, did we scoop the kitty litter boxes this week? It was really just, it was a really easy way to just let go and be right there and be present and enjoy what I was doing. There was a feeling of innocence. I really felt like my childhood self. I felt small. I felt there was that I was sitting on a chair. The instructor was standing up. So there was, this exchange of power in the sense that they were instructing me on how to do something. And it was just really pure and lighthearted and innocent and really comforting.
And I think that comfort or that feeling of safety is sometimes why people regress backwards, because they desire that.
I can understand that. I've had the conversation before with somebody in a class that they were saying that, anytime that they are stressed, they always age regress. And people have chatted with them about, not being able to negotiate with them because they're regressing. Any thoughts or anything on that?
At least for me, I never want to negotiate with someone who is in an altered state of consciousness, which is essentially what regression is. Just like I wouldn't want to try to negotiate with somebody who was drunk. I want people to be in the here and now, be present, and being able to make adult decisions. Do you want to do this? Is this okay? Is that not okay? So really making sure that people are in a normal headspace and that there is not some sort of power dynamic or an imbalance in place while doing that negotiating is, I think, really important. If you are doing something with someone and they seem to hit an altered headspace or that maybe folks didn't expect, I would, at least for myself, be pretty cautious about what's going on. Just because that altered headspace changes an awful lot. And I just want to really be considerate of people doing stuff that they want to do and are comfortable with.
Understand. Thank you.
I am going to guess here that the expert witness in front of the Texas Supreme Court had something to do with custody.
No, actually, from my understanding, the case was about representing yourself as a minor and in some sort of online interactions and how that was illegal down in Texas, and they were trying to say that, the the individual is not a minor in this circumstance, but age play is kind of different than that.
Gotcha.
Interesting.
I mean, I've heard some horror stories about custody and age play, so that's why I assumed that. Well, I've heard some horror stories. I came very close to living my own with my ex, but yeah, if you're into age play, don't let your ex know about it. Would be my advice. Because while we know better, you don't want to know what the judge thinks.
Right. And a lot of times people, especially in a charged personal situation like that, really, really make it something that it's not.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the book.
So it was about 10 years ago now that I wrote the Age Play from Diapers to Diplomas book, which largely focused on the littles part. And a lot of people have told me that has really helped them an awful lot. But one thing that's really kind of been neglected in a lot of books or a lot of media is how to go about doing it as a caregiver. And a lot of times people kind of fumble and try things or don't realize that there's other options or have maybe misconceptions about what that caregiver role is. And I was trying to collect different practices, kind of taking a look at, what would negotiation look like as a caregiver? What do people get out of being a caregiver? What can you do with your non-caregiver partner? And kind of provide a roadmap for people who are maybe a little bit uncertain. Or maybe the folks that their partners or someone else comes up to them and says, you are a daddy. And then they're kind of like really uncertain where to go with that. So this is kind of just trying to help folks find that headspace, find that part of themselves, and maybe open it up for more people to explore that caregiver headspace.
Gotcha. But the book that's already in print is called Age Play from Diapers to Diplomas, and I will throw an Amazon link to that in the show notes. Before we jump into the part of the show that we like to call Inside the Kinkster Studio, is there anything else you would like to share about age play?
I just wanted to say that a lot of times there is a big divide in the age play community about folks that are sexual age players versus non-sexual age players. And I always want to say that, it isn't such a cut and dried, you're either one or the other, but a lot of times it is on that spectrum. And
Sure.
Maybe folks that consider themselves non-sexual age players may have something in there. And I want to say that they're both really legitimate views to take. And I kind of come from a radically inclusive umbrella where I don't want folks dividing themselves out and dividing the age play community based on sexual versus non-sexual. I think we are so much stronger if we all come together and realize that we do have these differences sometimes.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what Paul said and just say that, the age play community is definitely better together and stronger together. And just to reiterate that if you're struggling with accepting yourself as an age player or accepting yourself as a caregiver, to seek out other people and talk to other people. Don't let yourself be alone with that. Look for community. It will most of the time help and give you some confidence to be able to really dive down this path, which can be incredibly helpful, and just really loving and caring.
Excellent. I actually do have one more question. Do you ever hear about anybody age playing older?
So very interestingly, I feel like it's incredibly rare, but some people do it. And I know that when I was writing the age play book, I talked to a guy who did geriatric age play. And he would still wear a diaper because that's what some older folks do. And actually, a lot of the elements of like nursing home or skilled nursing care really kind of look very similar to that adult baby model as well. I would argue that in the caregiver frame of reference, a lot of people do play older than they actually are. So I know that back when I was in my 20s and feeling like a daddy, I kind of projected myself out to be older there as well.
I mean, I'd heard about it theoretically. I have not heard about anybody specifically doing it other than myself, I guess, because mine is very specific. I do a Santa Claus roleplay. I'm playing older. I only break it out for about a month a year, but
there you
it's
go.
a lot of fun.
That's really cool.
I imagine.
Okay, so moving to the part of the show we call Inside the Kinkster Studio. This is where we get to know you a little bit better. Are you game for that?
Totally.
100%.
Okay. What is your favorite toy in your toy bag?
I'm going to let Brandy start.
Ooh. I mean, this has nothing to do with age play, but just recently we've gotten into staples, so the staple gun.
Nice.
And I would say for me, I have a pair of claws, which are like kind of leather gauntlets with 3 or 4 fake, maybe inch or 2 claws that come out, and they're wonderful for scratching and abrasion play.
Nice. Yeah, I was going to say, any of these questions are not directly related to age play. This is just in general.
Cool.
So, yeah. So you don't have to focus on age play. This is just focusing in general on anything.
Okay.
What has been your biggest failure in kink, and what did you learn from it?
That's a tough question.
I would have to say that, especially when you're playing with people that you don't know, be very clear and very specific about what is to go on and what is not to go on. And definitely if you don't feel comfortable or you are people pleasing by accepting a scene, it's probably wiser not to do it than to do it. Because when I was much younger, I was even more people pleasing than I am now. So
I'm going to say that my biggest failure probably was at the very beginning of my journey, jumping into a very strict DS dynamic before I explored everything that kink had to offer. And just assuming that I was a submissive because I had submissive tendencies. Looking back, I wish I had given myself the grace to be able to pause that and, taste like the kink buffet of life and just try a little bit to really find out who I was rather than pigeonholing myself into a role because that's what it seemed like I wanted.
What 3 words describe your play?
I want to say edge play. Does that count as 1 word, or am I counting that as 2 words? Are we getting technical?
No,
We'll
that'll
call
count
it
as 1 word.
edgy.
Okay.
We'll count that as 1.
Okay, edgy. Hard. And playful.
and I would say caring, taboo, and close.
Nice. What are your catchphrases?
Oh, this is a good one. I got this, Paul.
Okay.
He will say, "Oh, baby cakes," and I'll say, "Oh, daddy muffin." Or he'll say, "Oh, baby doll," and I'll say, "Oh, daddy G.I. Joe." And we just kind of, he'll say one word and I'll pick the opposite, but for a big.
And that's kind of the call and response that kind of builds a ritual that brings us closer, because that's entirely something that is just us.
What is something that people would be surprised to know about you? That you're willing to share, of course.
I would guess that people would kind of be surprised that I really have an interest in gardening.
Okay.
That's a different type of caretaking.
He
It
cut out. I
is.
didn't hear what he said. What did he say?
Gardening.
Gardening? Yes.
The plants don't talk back very much, so that's really positive.
I would say that I probably come across as somebody who has a no fucks to give attitude. But deep down, I have all the fucks to give and I care really, really deeply. And I'm always questioning if I'm doing enough or if I'm doing enough for the community.
Well, secret's out now.
Right?
I know, right?
All right. My favorite question. What's your favorite curse word?
Fuck.
I would also have to go with fuck. And it's very interesting because I didn't start swearing as much until I became a therapist. So.
I mean,
I'm so thankful he said
fair.
a daddy and not I met Brandy. So, I'm counting that as a win for me.
So, last question and my favorite question to ask. If you had to have sex with one Muppet, which Muppet would it be and why?
Oh, I know my answer immediately, so I'm going to go Animal, of course, because he's a drummer.
I am tempted to say Miss Piggy because I love pig play, but I think I'm gonna actually go with the lady from the rock band,
Janice?
because she has like wonderful eyelashes.
That's funny.
Awesome. Great answers. Okay. Well, that about does it for today. I want to thank you for being on our show
yes, thank you.
and talking about age play. For our listeners, upcoming synagogue classes, in person and virtual, are Leave Your Mark and body drumming and electroplay. Find all the details on that on our website. But that is it. That's our show. Say goodnight, little bit.
Good night, little bit.
Follow us on Facebook, FetLife, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube as Synagogue BDSM, and on Instagram and TikTok as Synagogue Kink. If you enjoyed or learned something from this podcast, consider making a donation via PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Patreon, or Ko-fi. Username Synagogue, or find those links to all of those on our website, synagoguebdsm.com. Remember, that's synagogue with an I. Also on the website, links to past episodes, upcoming classes, book us as educators, shop our store, and more.
Synagogue hosts and guests are subject matter experts but are not the expert. We believe that, outside of violating consent, there is no wrong way to do kink, except to think your way is the only way. This show is presented from a RAC, risk-aware consensual kink point of view, and not SSC, safe, sane, consensual, because every individual's definition of safe is different based on their own risk profile. The use of the word safe on this show fits our definition of safe, and that does not have to be your definition. Opinions expressed by guests on the show are those of the person expressing the opinion, not of the show.
Just a reminder, we try to make our content as inclusive as possible, regardless of gender, orientation, role in the lifestyle, etc. But we do inherently speak from our own point of view. For the most part, substitute our identity with your own to make it work. We want to know when we make a mistake, so we can learn and grow from those mistakes. So if you feel like we did say something that is genuinely offensive, we encourage you to let us know. Reach out to us with your questions, comments, or concerns via our website or call us at 469-269-0403.
Brought to you today by the letters and the number.
San Diego High School Football Room!